here on 94.9. It is 16 minutes past 4. And it is that time of day for Creation Ministries International. And today we have Dr. John in the studio, Dr. John Anderson, and he'll be answering, all your questions. If you have any questions, please send them through to our text line. Just SMS 0401 949 949. Of course, we talk about recent events in the news, and I'd also like to ask you, Dr. John, look, firstly, welcome. Nice to see you today.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. It's great to be here. And
you've been away for a few weeks.
I have. I've been really out of it. I haven't known what's been going on here because I had to go to Townsville for a week and a half because my sister-in-law had been admitted to a nursing home and we had to go and see her. Mm-hmm. And last week I was in Melbourne for a family funeral, so I haven't known what's been going on with this segment. And I believe you were off last week yourself.
Yes, yep.
But
rest up.
how's the appeal been going?
Well, the appeal at this stage, I believe, we're on $49,050. So we're $950 short of being a third of the way there.
Oh, right. So there's a fair way to go.
Still a fair way to go. And, of course, it doesn't finish till this Saturday. If there's anybody out there who has maybe already prayed about it or, thought about it and they'd like to donate towards REMA, keeping us going because we're a listener-supported station, please just go to the website. You can go there right now, rema.cc. Click on the banner at the top, and all donations over $2 are fully tax deductible. But yeah, it's apparently they had an awesome opening day, and that's when I first couldn't come into the studio because I was crook. So I didn't get to meet everybody, and apparently it was awesome.
Yeah, well, look, it's a very, very important appeal. I mean, it's so vital to keep a Christian radio station on the Central Coast. So, I'd encourage everybody who's out there listening to get behind this appeal because it's certainly a worthy cause.
Yes. And, of course, we have so many awesome teaching programs, and yours is actually one of them, Dr. John. We learn so much about creation and evolution, and I mean in the past we really have learned a lot about things like dinosaurs and aliens. There's been so many awesome chats with you guys from Creation Ministries.
Well, I've got another one this week.
Yeah.
Because while I was in Townsville, we had a bit of time to spare. So I thought, I'll go and watch a movie. Uh-huh. And we decided to go and see the Planet of the Apes movie.
Okay. Yeah.
Now I believe that's the fourth in the series, and I hadn't seen any of the others. Uh-huh. So it was really, I've seen shorts of them, of course, but our listeners might know quite a lot more about it than I do. But it really was amazing, actually, to watch a modern movie with absolutely no sex and absolutely no bad language. I mean, you couldn't believe it. There's a modern movie, and all of those things that we're expecting to see in modern movies were just not there.
Yeah, that's good.
So that was very, very good.
How about the whole evolutionary side of it, though?
Oh well, look, it was really interesting, and it was amazing how they've obviously plagiarised so many biblical themes because as I say, the listeners might know more about it than I do because that's the first one I'd seen. But the movie opens and all the apes are gathered around the body of this ape called Caesar, who really seems to have been a type of Moses because he'd worked out a system of ethics, a bit, and this was a bit like our 10 Commandments, these ethics that he worked out. So it was really, really good. But the what seems to have happened to get the apes into the position that they were in is humans had been mucking around with genetic engineering. Yes. I mean, how about that for a theme? Yep. Surprise, surprise, Anyway, what had happened was that apparently a lot of humanity had been wiped out with this, but they managed to do something to cause a mutation that enabled the apes to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. So they then communicated, you see. And so that was really how the ape uprising began. Now, I thought it was very interesting because, of course, they were talking English. Now, I don't know what was happening in the rest of the world because children learn language from, imitating their parents.
Yes.
So how the apes were getting on in Europe, I don't know. But this was America anyway, so they were talking English. But look, the biblical themes were amazing. Apart from the ape who was really a Moses type, the hero who was a type of chimp.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Noah.
Okay.
I wonder where they got that name from.
Yes.
And but he was a chimp, and he belonged to a tribe of chimps, but one of his mates looked a bit like an orangutan, but
Yes.
he was a friendly guy. But the really bad guys were the big gorillas. They were bad, and one of them called himself Caesar after the first Caesar, you see.
Yep.
And he was a type of antichrist.
Wow.
So, look, the themes were just absolutely amazing, and it was very, very, very intriguing to see how they did it.
Yep.
And of course, Hollywood has learned a thing or two in the times that we've been having movies, all the century or whatever it is that Hollywood's been going,
Yes.
and they know that apes actually have brown eyes, and their eyes are not expressive. They're not like human eyes.
Yep.
We've got the whites of our eyes, white sclerae, and it's our eye movements that give us such a great amount of expression with our eyes. Well, apes don't have that, but Hollywood makes them have it.
Yes, okay.
And so, of course, they are very, very expressive now in the movies. So it's great for movies, but it's just not the reality. But the movie was interesting, and I thought actually it was about time as a creationist speaker that I had a look at one of these evolutionary type movies. And there's no doubt that it was a very, very clever production.
Yep.
And of course, there weren't any motor vehicles or anything like that, but the apes were riding horses. They'd certainly learnt to do that, and I'd seen that in the shorts of the previous Planet of the Apes type movies. Yeah, so it was intriguing to say the least.
Wow.
And what really got me, of course, was this ability of the apes to speak. Mm-hmm. Because the movie talked about humanity playing around with engineering viruses.
Yep.
And there is some evidence that there's a genetic connection with speech, because there's a gene that it's called the FOXP2 gene. Now, obviously, there's much more to it than that, because to unscramble the sounds you make, you've got to have a centre in your brain that will unscramble them. Mm-hmm. And, of course, you've got to have the appropriate musculature in your tongue to be able to make the sounds. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not just a simple matter of changing one gene. There's an awful lot more to it than that. You've got to have all the other ancillary equipment to go with it. Yep. But, there's no doubt that this gene is associated with speech. Mm. And they realised that because they examined a lot of, this is not the movie, of course, but humanity in examining people who had certain types of speech difficulties, they had problems with this particular gene that's called the FOXP2 gene. Yep. But the interesting thing is that gene is also present in animals, right? It's chimps and gorillas and rhesus monkeys and even mice have got identical FOXP2 genes. And orangutans have only got about 2 nucleotide-based differences between chimps and gorillas and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got that gene, but of course they can't talk.
Yeah.
But when the human gene is examined, there's several nucleotide bases difference in the human gene.
Yep.
So and we know that gene is associated with speech. So it's certainly not the whole story, but it's an interesting gene.
Wow,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Something else that was in the news over the last few weeks, artificial intelligence has actually been listening to whale pods, and they reckon they've cracked the code. In they can actually tell what whales are saying to each other with the sounds that they make underwater. They say it'll take quite some time before it completely cracks their language, but they're starting to work out certain things that they're saying to each other, just with these sort of sounds that we just laugh at. Like when we watch shows like Nemo, we just thought it was a weird sound.
Well,
but
whales will have this gene.
yeah, they're really talking to each other.
Yeah. Well, they're communicating what they're communicating, and the intricacies of it, I don't think we know, but it'll be very interesting to find out what it is.
AI, they reckon, is working out when they're saying, to take different directions and that sort of thing. So it is very interesting.
Yeah.
Look, we'll come back to Dr. John Anderson very soon. You're on 94.9. It's 27 minutes past 4. Still, you're on 94.9. It's 21 minutes to 5. And we've got Dr. John in the studio from Creation Ministries International. And we've been having a very interesting conversation today and just talking about genes and the speech gene and basically how different animals have, these genes that allow them to speak in different ways, I guess.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. They certainly have this FOXP2 gene, and it's the same in quite a lot of animals. But the human version of it is quite a bit different. But the interesting thing about the human version is that because we're obviously the scientists have sequenced the whole gene, it's the same in Neanderthals, right?
Yeah, right.
Now that was no surprise to creationists, of course, because we've always believed that Neanderthals were fully human.
Yep.
Whereas evolutionists believe they're somewhere along the evolutionary pathway to
Hollywood believes that too. If you've seen any movies with Neanderthals,
well, but it is interesting, you might remember Time magazine a little while back had a picture of a Neanderthal woman, artist's conception of this Neanderthal woman on the front page. They called her Wilma.
Yeah,
obviously after Fred Flintstone's wife. But of course we know that the Neanderthals they used tools and they made musical instruments and so on, and obviously they could speak and communicate because they had the same gene that modern humans have.
Yep.
So creationists have always believed that they were just modern humans. And people probably may not realise that the word Neanderthal really doesn't mean, an early human. It comes from skeletons that were discovered in the Neander Valley in Germany, because Thal, it means valley in German, and Neander is a river.
So Neanderthal isn't really a time period, it's more a location.
It is, yeah. It's the Neander Valley in Germany, and that's where the skeletons were found. And of course, they were slightly different from some modern humans, but they were also found all over Europe. And we know that the evolutionists believe they interbred with humans, but we know they were human anyway. And we're all carrying some Neanderthal DNA because, you see, the Bible tells us that only 8 people survived the flood of Noah about 4,500 years ago. Mm-hmm. So every skeleton that we come across now is a post-flood skeleton. Therefore, Neanderthals were post-flood because all of humanity, apart from those in the ark, were killed in the flood.
Yep.
So clearly the Neanderthal skeletons are human skeletons.
Yep.
They may look a little bit different, just like a lot of modern human skeletons look a little bit different too. You know, we don't all look the same.
You've also mentioned before, Dr. John, that DNA over time, like over generations, it breaks down. It doesn't grow. It doesn't get better. It actually gets worse. In which case, those people from hundreds or thousands of years ago, their DNA was better than ours today.
Well, certainly if you go back before the flood, it most certainly was better. It hadn't had time to accumulate bad mutations. And after the flood, you see the ages of the people mentioned, like Abraham's father, Terah, and Abraham himself, and Isaac and Jacob. The lifespans are coming down and down and down, and by the time of Moses we get 120 years for Moses. By the time we get to David, we're looking at 70 or 80 years, like us now. So it's been the accumulation of those harmful mutations, so almost certainly, that has given us a shortened lifespan.
Yeah.
But, you know, we believe the Neanderthals were fully human, and it's pretty obvious that they were able to speak. But the evolutionists, of course, believe that Neanderthals lived somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 years ago. But you see, if the flood occurred 4,500 years ago, as the Bible tells us, and modern science doesn't believe in the flood anyway, then quite clearly they're post-flood. So that 200,000 to 400,000 years is just nonsense.
Well, why couldn't they be pre-flood if they found a skeleton?
The flood really destroyed, well, when we talk about skeletons, we're talking about people that had been buried, because the Neanderthals buried their dead, just like we do. Well, there's no way burial sites could have survived the flood. Everything else was destroyed, and all the trees were uprooted and all this sort of stuff.
Okay, but if there'd been a giant landslide prior and there was a body under there, they could dig it up.
I think the landslide would have been wiped out in the flood as well. You see, don't forget the entire Earth was covered to the depth of probably about 20 metres or so, all over the world.
Yep.
And all the trees were uprooted. Because it wasn't just a flood, it was earthquakes and volcanic activity and all of these sort of things. So the first Earth was destroyed. That was God's plan. Destroy that first Earth and save Noah and his family and two of every kind of animal and bird, and start again. So really there's just no way that any of these skeletons that are found could be anything but post-flood. They're not pre-flood skeletons. But anyway, look, it was all very interesting. I was very pleased that I saw the movie. Yep. Because I hadn't seen them before, and it's just educational to see the way Hollywood does things.
Yeah.
But it was great. And of course, one of the things that the evolutionists say, they don't say that we're actually descended from chimps. They say that we and chimps had a common ancestor, obviously an ape-like ancestor back in the dim distant past. So, but it's also interesting that Richard Dawkins, in one of his books, repeated a statement that had been made some years before, and this was back in the 70s and 80s we're talking about, that humans and chimps had only 90 or shared 99% of the same DNA, same genetics. Well, that sounds like pretty close. But when you think about it, it's not. And really, they had no way back in the 70s and 80s of making that statement, because there was a project in the 90s going into the 2000s called the Human Genome Project, which was a project to map the entire human genome. Well, that wasn't completed till about 2003. So it would be impossible for anybody to make that statement in 1980.
So the numbers were made up, basically.
Yeah, that's right. They just plucked that out of the air. Where they got it from, I suspect, was probably the similarity of some proteins, because a lot of the proteins in us and in animals are very, very similar. For example, insulin is quite a small protein, and pig insulin differs from humans by only one nucleotide base. So I think insulin's pretty small. It's only got 80-odd nucleotide bases in it anyway. But, yeah, pigs have only got one different, which is why pig insulin was used treating diabetics back in the early days before human insulin became available.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so yeah, a lot of the proteins are very, very similar. But now that we've done a lot more research, then the similarity between humans and chimps is very much less than 99%. But even if it were 99%, you know what a 1% difference would be? We've got 3 billion nucleotide bases in our genome. So a 1% difference is 30 million. And we're talking about mutations one at a time, 30 million times, without any direction. It's all random as far as evolution is concerned, and it doesn't. Mutations don't improve things anyway. Yeah. So really, I mean, it just demonstrates that any concept of evolution on a scientific basis is just nonsense. It's impossible. You know? But, the evolutionists don't want to admit that because, that would mean there was a creator God and they might have some need to submit to him. So, that's going to be kept completely out of their considerations.
All right. Well, Dr. John, thank you. The end of another awesome week. And when are you back next?
Yeah, I'm back again next week. So
good. Looking forward to it
to
already.
Be continued, and I don't know what we're going to be talking about next week. But look, send those questions in.
Absolutely.
We want to talk about what you want to hear me talk about. So send the questions in to 0401
949 949.
Good. Thank you, Mick.
No worries. Thank you, Dr. John. And, you're on 94.9. It is 10 minutes to 5.